So
can
I
talk
want to
about.
press you on something, and sorry to turn it suddenly into anarchy, um, but it sounds like you're seeing real shift in the behavior of school districts because of this. Is that right? What
Oh,
are you seeing?
absolutely. Great point. At the same time, when we became real aggressive of taking over schools, we did see growth in schools in the other parts of the state because they realized that the RSD wasn't going to stand by and let schools fail for a decade anymore. And my former boss, who taught me a lot, Paul Pastorak, I remember we were in a room, and me, him, and another gentleman, we all had tears in our eyes because for us, it was just like, these children's lives are on the line. And our typical bureaucratic staff, we were working on changing things in the State Department of Education at that time. No one could see clear as to how we could mechanically take over schools outside of New Orleans. So we made it up on the fly. We created memorandums of understanding where we just like literally badgered the board and said, these are the things you're gonna do for these schools if you wanna keep some semblance of control. And it worked fairly well, but I think the biggest thing is that other schools that were either C schools, D schools, they really started thinking, hey, if we don't wanna lose our buildings, if we don't wanna lose our funding, we're going to have to do something dramatically different. And so that's really been a driving force.
So wait, did you just say that they were concerned about losing their buildings and their money?
Yes.
They weren't concerned about the kids?
Well, they would say the kids in the sense that kids basically are, what, the dollars. And so it's sad, but what it is that there's a dollar amount attached to each kid basically in every state. And so in Louisiana, even like now, I have in Baton Rouge, there's about 600 kids who were bused to another part of the parish because the state was taking over those schools about 4 years ago, and it created overcrowding. And now they want us to give back a building in order to put those kids in. And what's the real issue? And again, it's the funding, and they need the facilities that they lost. And I say, yes, you can have those kids come back. They can stay in the building while we will educate them and do what? Recruit a high-quality operator long-term. And so, but it is money, and it is unfortunate that it's looked at that way. But they have the same mechanisms in place to be able to really empower individuals closest to the kids to educate. I would challenge you to ask your local education leaders to think about doing what we actually do. I don't really want to be in power. I'm decentralizing power and empowering, again, it's not cliche-ish, it's real, those closest to the children. So when, at the end of the day, when we're talking to different school districts, it's always about, we don't want to operate the schools directly. We could, but that has not proven to serve us well. We want to empower those who are going to be closest and have just that total, singular, laser-like vision for those children. And I will stand back and give them the space and be good government to allow them to do that and put rules and regulations so we can make sure that children are served equitably and with strong accountability measures. But when you ask folks to give up the reins to empower others, then you will see truly where their heart and their intentions are.
Well, let me jump to Dr. Romero then, because Gloria, you've been intimately involved in Desert Trails, and the way that Parent Trigger worked at Desert Trails, which is a rural elementary school in about 100 miles east of Los Angeles, the majority of the parents signed a charter petition, and they accepted proposals from charter schools to take over their school. Lots of court battles ensued, and that school will open under charter in the fall. But now with 24th Street Elementary School, the most recent school that has done it, there was an interesting development that I heard. Is it true that the school district is actually competing against the charters to take over that school?
Well, this is, there's a lot that's going on. Let me just say that this law, this little bill, I mean, you would think that California had just gone on fire. It was amazing. First of all, just being in the Capitol, arguing that, seeing the long line of the status quo, the education bureaucracy, including the Parent Teachers Association, saying you can't trust the parents. I guess they wanted to keep baking cookies, who knows? But you know, it was amazing to see this. The first set of parents who tried it were in Compton. These were the first parents, first law, first time written in the nation. And of course, like anything, these were much like the Brown parents in Topeka, you know, versus the board there. These were the first parents. This was history in the making. And so there was a lot of intimidation, threats. Parents, Latino parents, were threatened with deportation. I mean, it was horrendous. on a technicality, that petition got thrown out. Desert Trails was successful, but only after a long court battle, testifying, et cetera. So LA Unified, of course, came. We have a reformed superintendent there. This is my concern, though. I wrote parent trigger law because I mean it. It's the urgency of now. I don't want showtime. I don't want promises. I don't want to play footsies and some promise for change in the future. So I'm looking at what's happening in LA Unified, and I'm going to go ahead and say it right now that the purpose of putting this forth was not to have, and again, too, I don't want to question the intents or motives of our LA superintendent, but it means you change it now. And the parents then should have that under, again, the federal law. You charterize, you close it, again, change the superintendent, change, whatever. The basic provisions under No Child Left Behind are what's carried over. We have to watch to make sure that it doesn't get dilly-dally, sort of hidden and deterred, so that the district has time then to go ahead and make the change.
But how are you going to feel if the parents who've just done parent trigger choose to take the district's plan over a charter plan? Is that going to be okay with you? After all, it's parents and they're choosing.
And let me be clear. In writing this, the law was written not for parents to run the school. I'm going to be very clear about that. Parents are the parents. But certainly to transform that, and to transform it essentially under existing laws, which are there on the books, yet just weren't used. So that was the intent in writing it. The devil's in the detail. Depends upon what it comes down to, because you are allowed a plan. Remember, under NCLB, you have the fifth option that nobody ever did. In fact, when we wrote Parent Trigger, I excluded that fifth option because it basically meant a wastebasket where you get some suit fly down from Sacramento, they give you a plan, and then they fly away, and 12 years later, that school is still on the watch list, and the consultant pocketed their money. So it's something that I'm going to watch, we're going to see, but that's the red flag right now, is that I don't want this to be taken over and for games to be paid. I wrote that bill because I mean it. You bring about the change, and you change it now, and under existing federal law. There are only so many options. Like, do it. You had how many years to change the school? Oh my gosh, and you're doing it now because the parents finally, after 10 years, signed a petition and turned it in. So, not to question the motives of adults in the system, but they can be very suspect.
Patricia, I want to shift us a little bit, because some of the most revolutionary things that are happening in Florida are actually happening in the traditional schools with blended and online learning, and Florida has been a leader in this. How have you guys been involved in that, and what are you seeing?
Well, I think, again, it's one of those things where you have to look at policies in a different way. If you think about most state laws, they were written before the internet. Most certification laws were written before we had the ability to have distance learning and blended learning. And so one of the things that Florida has done is to really take a look at digital learning policies across the spectrum, how we fund schools, how they can certify and hire teachers, how they can staff their schools. You'd be surprised how many simple department processes are in place, for example, in Florida, maybe in Texas, that won't allow a school district to report a teacher teaching at multiple schools at the same time. Makes sense, right? Before the internet. But when you have blended learning and virtual learning options, you're going to have to look at incredible ways to break down those barriers in policy, because why shouldn't we want a teacher in Miami-Dade County to be able to teach students in Jacksonville, or to teach students in Miami-Dade County that are in 5 different schools at the same time? Georgia, I've heard Governor Bob Wise, the former governor of West Virginia, who's also very passionate and co-chairs a digital learning council with Governor Bush, talk about in the state of Georgia, they have 85 state certified physics teachers and 440 high schools. Well, without blended learning, without virtual learning options, how are you going to provide physics instruction to students at those 440 schools? And so Florida has done a tremendous amount of reform in the areas of allowing public schools and charter schools that are public schools, but traditional and charter schools to offer blended learning, virtual learning. Make sure if you have class size caps that you don't have class size caps on blended learning or virtual learning schools. We have the Florida Virtual School that is the largest public virtual school in the country. This year we'll probably have 500,000 course enrollments from public, private, and home education students. Every single school district in the state is required to offer virtual learning options to their students. And we have the ability of any student in the school district to take a course offered by any other school district. And the money follows the child. So it's going to start, the law is relatively new on the books, that one. It's going to start changing the way our districts think about who they can even educate. They're incentivized by money. And so giving them the opportunity to offer really innovative courses and attract students from across the state, we believe that every student in Florida is going to have access to wonderfully rigorous electives and core courses once you break down these barriers. So really taking a look at your certification laws, your funding laws, your seat time versus completion-based policies. Those are things that have really allowed for digital learning to take hold in the state of Florida.
Thanks. So Senator Patrick, I know you've been out barnstorming around the state with lots of new ideas in hand. What kinds of fears and hopes have you heard from the people of Texas as you've been out?
First of all, now you see why I'm so fired up. I've been surrounding myself with people like our panelists today, and it is as exciting as football. I mean, we're in the game. You know, we have general managers and new coaches, and we're going to go out there and make our underdog players better and show that we can get our players to perform with the best. That's what we can do. This is exciting. We should not, in Texas, of all places, with all due respect to our other states represented, we should not take a backseat to anyone on any issue, and especially this issue. So the first thing I did when I was named chair back in October, I think it was, is I decided to go around the state and meet as many superintendents as I could on a listening tour. And I met probably about 150. I went to West Texas, I went to the Valley, kind of the central part of the state, and I listened. Very interesting. A lot of the discussion was often, you know, Senator, if we could just operate like a charter school, you know, because they have less rules to follow. So in the bill that we introduced last week, Senate Bill 2, there is a provision in there for public schools to become home rule charters easily. It's on the books now, but no one's ever done it. It's too many hoops to jump through. This makes it easy. The school board votes. We actually had opposition from the Superintendent's Association. And we said, well, why? And we actually got this feedback. Really? Well, it gives us too much flexibility.
We had the
I
same
heard the
thing.
same thing.
We had
in
the same
California.
thing.
It's amazing to me. You want a chance to go longer. You want a chance to have Saturday classes. You want a chance to get parents involved and sign some contracts. You want to start your school year a few days sooner. No, don't get outside the bubble. So, but what has happened is predictable. There was a rally here last week by Save Our Schools. I thought we were about saving our kids, but Save Our Schools had 2,000 or 3,000 people out there chanting the governor's name in vain, my name in vain. Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, warned me last year when we met for the first time on a panel like this, when he really inspired me, we have to have someone willing to take arrows. Well, I'm taking them, but it's worth the fight. It's worth the fight. So the predictability is, and what's the argument? And look, this organization, we who believe in reform, have to take this on. The argument is, we just want more money. We want more money. And we have to educate the public that we already spend about half of our budget on education. The public doesn't know that. We have to educate the public that while we've been spending more money, performance is state level. The public really doesn't know that. Jimmy Don Aycock has A through F in House Bill 5. We'll either just take that or we'll have it in one of our bills. The great news here, Jimmy Don Aycock and I met. We came in the same time in 2007. We met early on. We had dinner, and we're going to work like this. It's not important if it's a Senate bill or a House bill. It's important it's the right bill. Kids come first. Bottom line, end of story. So the opposition I went out to speak to the PTA, and, I was booed out there, no more vouchers, no more vouchers. Look, the business tax credit, I don't even use the word voucher, and I tell everyone, that's an old word. The business tax credit's a new idea. And we knew this would happen, but we who believe in what we're fighting for, we cannot sit back and not try to fight and win the political debate. It is like a political campaign. And if we, who believe in reform, let them continue to swing away that we want to starve schools, we don't care about teachers, we don't want to fund, then that is the perception the public will have. There was a full-page ad. Did you all see it? Full-page ad in the Austin American-Statesman, Houston Chronicle, that said, why would we put money into other options when we're not funding our schools? Why would we think of business tax credits or charter schools when we're not funding our schools? Look, we are threatening their turf, and they are serious. And we are at the best position, in my view, we have ever been in the history of the state to get this done. To get this done. Royce West, in fact, we could get you with Royce. Royce West has agreed to carry the Recovery School District bill. Okay? Senator Lucio is going to carry the business tax credit bill. We need a little bit more help, including from some of our Republican senators. Okay? So if you in this room believe in what you're hearing, if you believe in the mission, if you believe in the goal, it is time to get all in. I am all in. Okay? And I can't do it by myself. And neither can Jimmy Don Aycock. And we have some difference of opinions over on the other side of, what they want to support or what they don't support. But if we can get 85 to 90% of our agenda, and I believe we can, but we need you more than ever. This is the time. If we don't get it done now, we might not get this chance again for a very, very long time. And remember, what you heard when I said about Condoleezza Rice said we need a revolution, not evolution. What do you take away from here? Urgency. Now. No excuses. And so we can make this case. If, real quick, when I talk to some of my conservative groups at a town hall or something, and they say, well, you're not funding the schools. I said, well, wait a minute, 50% we already spend. Healthcare is going to be another 50%. We don't have those dollars. We have to be smarter. We have to be more efficient. We have to improve our graduation rates, et cetera, et cetera. I said, by the way, the other side is fighting for probably a state income tax and doubling your property taxes. Ooh, don't want that. So we have to fight, and we're all in.
Caprice, I just want to add one thing, is that this really should be a bipartisan effort. I'm a Democrat.
Yes.
I'm a Democrat. And in California, I forged a coalition. I figured this is a civil rights coalition. This is about kids. It's about kids and parents who understand this is about one shot at the American dream. And so forging that, a Democratic author from East Los Angeles working with Republican caucus, and then I just needed 5 other brave Democrats who were willing to take on the special interests, signed by a Republican governor, and responding to a call from a Democratic president who challenged the nation to race to the top. It's about having the courage of conviction and forming the partnership and never letting anybody say, oh, that's a Republican idea or that's a lefty idea. It's about kids and it's about time. So I think that's the challenge.
Patrick, you were leaning forward. Were you just waving that you're a Democrat too, or you're?
I just was thinking that I found a kindred spirit here. I feel like a long lost relative because, just from I remember, and I've mentioned his name, Paul Pasterek, who was state superintendent of Louisiana. And when he was named state superintendent, I was like the first person he hired. Somebody mentioned me to him. I was just toiling away, as he would say, in the bowels of the department. And we met, we talked for about an hour, and he asked me to be his confidential assistant. And, 6, 7 years later, I'm superintendent over Recovery School District, and I never saw it coming. But one of the things that, when I remember sitting with him and talking, I realized that he and I just shared the same value. And whether he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat and just grew up in that mindset, we were like brothers and still are on values. And one of the things I told him, I said, Paul, I can go and talk to a group and say the exact same thing you're saying, and it just goes over totally differently. Because sometimes people don't hear the message, they just see the messenger. And what you have to do is figure out and find those people who believe in the same values you believe in. You have to find them. It's time-consuming, it's difficult, but you have to do that because what we're finding, particularly in Louisiana, reform cannot continue to be sustained just by either businesses or oftentimes we had a lot of well-meaning people coming in from out of state because of Katrina. What's going to have to be done is you're going to have to find those individuals who have been failed by the system to become the voices. Because oftentimes than not, education is the one area that is more bipartisan, and when you really look at it and you take away Republican, Democrat, and names and just put what folks want, the majority of people in this country want what reformers are saying. But oftentimes we box ourselves in a way that they can't even receive what the vision and message is. And so I would just encourage and echo that because I take the arrows in Louisiana. I look in the front and everything because I don't look like anything that the stereotypes might put as far as someone leading school reform. But there are many people who just are valued-oriented, and it works. And it might sound Pollyanna-ish, but trust me, it's not. That is very real because when you ask the single mom who has 2 kids and she's just struggling to try to make it and she knows her diploma is really not worth anything, when you ask her, hey, we have a way to try to make it better for your children. What do you want? I guarantee you she will side with that agenda every single time. But you have to make the effort to reach that audience because if not, it's just going to seem like high-handed, heavy-handedness, and it won't make the impact that you actually need. So just, I definitely felt like I needed to share that.
Yeah, appreciate that. I actually was given the task of making up time because we started about 15 minutes late. And so I have to be the mean one that says it's time to end. But I want to just leave you with something that is one of the guiding principles for us at the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. And it's just a simple sort of bit of multi-generational wisdom, and that is that if we want to fix things, we have to do more of what works and less of what doesn't and know the difference. Thank you very much.